Hi, this is Steven Stanfield. I'm a trial attorney in the Jacksonville, Florida area, and I'm here on 103.9 with Scott Grant.
Hi, this is Scott Grant. We're here in the studios in beautiful downtown Ponte Vedra Beach with Jennifer Price and Steven Stanfield. And Steven, you're our guest today. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
I've always liked you. You and I have talked about this. You're a really smart guy.
Thank you very much. I frankly am humbled by that, but I do appreciate it.
And now you're an attorney, and you're a trial attorney.
Yes, sir.
And I went to law school, and I was never a trial attorney. And I think all of us who grew up wanting to go to law school wanted at some point in the back of their mind to be a trial attorney.
I think that's what everybody thinks of in the general public when they think of lawyers, is they think of trial attorneys.
And how many trials have you done approximately in your life?
In excess of 100 jury trials and way more non-jury trials than that.
That's interesting. What's the breakdown? How many non-jury trials versus jury trials do you think?
Well, actually, my first year in practice as a prosecutor in Volusia County, I quit counting at 75.
Wow. And how long were you a prosecutor?
3 years, from 1996 until 1999.
And you spent a lot of time in court.
It was rare when I got a day to sit in my office and do paperwork, which is why I took paperwork home every night.
And they worked you hard.
Yeah. You're a prosecutor for three reasons. You're a prosecutor, number one, to get trial experience. You're a prosecutor, number two, to learn how to be decisive and make decisions. And you're a prosecutor, number three, to keep the docket moving.
Yeah, I imagine that's true. How many, you always see a lot of plea bargains. Did a lot of your cases end in some sort of plea bargain? Were you pushing typically for a plea bargain?
Prosecutors drive the plea bargain system. The public tends to think it's about the defense bar. The reality is prosecutors, for political reasons, file more cases than they can actually prove in a courtroom, but they know that people looking at very stiff and very long sentences are going to take plea bargains to cases that they otherwise would take to trial.
You know, I saw this thing on television. I think it was on HBO, and it's really recent. It's about it's local. It's about the McDonald's scandal. You remember the McDonald's scandal?
Yes, with the Micanopy, excuse me, the Monopoly.
Micanopy Monopoly. There you go, Jennifer. What do you think of that?
I like Micanopy. I don't know if it has anything to do with the Monopoly game.
It popped in my mind. Gainesville, my hometown. I've lived there most of my life.
So I think it said something like 47 out of 51 of those cases went to a plea bargain.
I would not be surprised if that's the case.
And just when you were talking about plea bargains, we're sitting here talking about plea bargains. It sort of reminded me of that. So what's you did mostly criminal work then as a defense attorney as well?
Well, from 1999 until 2016, 2017, the bulk of my practice was criminal defense, 85%.
And this was not, I know some criminal defense guys here in town, this was not just DUIs.
This was not just DUIs. Everything from, I've handled everything from first-degree murder to jaywalking.
That sounds dark.
First-degree murder, I mean, that, again, when you're growing up, and you want to be a lawyer, right? I mean, you want to be Perry Mason, you want to be Clarence Darrow, that's what you picture. I mean, you don't picture yourself being a lawyer and going in and writing documents for the merger between GTE and Bell Atlantic, right? That's not what you're thinking when you're a kid.
No, it's not. My father's a retired attorney, and I can remember as a kid watching him sit at the family dining room table with legal pads writing what turned out to be 400- and 500-page contracts by hand. And my dad is a brilliant human being, but in his career as an attorney in 34 years, he did 2 jury trials.
Yeah, well, and that, I think, 95% of lawyers out there have not been in court. Is that fair? I mean, at least law school graduates.
Most people that go to law school never end up practicing law.
Right. I know that's the majority. I'm just thinking, what percentage end up in court? It's got to be a small amount.
It's a very small amount, and this isn't my opinion. This is something a retired, what we call a senior federal judge said. His name is Richard Kopp, K-O-P-F, in I believe Nebraska. He once said that criminal defense attorneys are at great risk of becoming drunken bastards because the stress is beyond description. But he also said that very few lawyers can ever become criminal defense attorneys. They don't have the skill set.
I imagine that's true, and the stress levels on you guys. I mean,
I quit.
I always say of all you guys who are doing trial work at all, that you're wound pretty tight.
Yes.
What made you quit?
I quit doing criminal defense because the stress literally was killing me. When I decided to quit, I'm 50 years old now, and I'm 6 foot tall, and I weigh about 190 pounds. When I quit, I was 46, 47 years old, and 6 foot tall, and I weighed about 225, 230, and that most of that was from drinking.
Oh yeah, well that's another sort of thing about the trial lawyers. They drink.
We
right?
drink, yeah. Trial lawyers drink a lot. The special criminal defense attorneys and prosecutors, they drink like fish.
You know, Tom Wolfe had a theory that he talked about in his book, The Right Stuff, that every profession had some person who was sort of the first person or the model, and so airline pilots all talk with kind of a Southern drawl because, you know, some of the early airline pilots were Southerners. So there was some hard drinking lawyer back in our history who set that sort of trend or habit.
That's probably true. I was at a legal seminar once in probably around 2005, 2006, where a prominent attorney was offered a glass of water as he was giving his presentation. He quoted the old W.C. Fields saw about, "I don't drink water because fish fornicate in it."
Oh, that's a good one.
That's funny. All right, let's take a break. Have Mike play some music, and we'll be back.
Hey, this is Rory Diamond, and you're listening to The Scott Grant Show on 103.9 FM.
Hi, this is Scott Grant, and we are broadcasting from Stanfast Asset Management Studios in Ponte Vedra Beach. I'm here today with Jennifer Price.
I'm surrounded by lawyers.
How does that feel?
I'm a little intimidated.
It's a little like swimming with sharks, huh?
Yes.
I like that.
I'm practicing listening on this show.
And our guest today is Steven Stanfield, who is a lawyer.
Yes, thank you for having me.
And a real lawyer.
I think you're a real lawyer, Scott.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. But I always think the guys that go to court are real lawyers. One of the very earliest sort of interchanges you and I had, we were on social media and we were talking about the criminal justice system in Duval County, and you were bemoaning the fact that we didn't have an Atticus Finch from this area. Do you remember that conversation?
I do. I do remember that. We have a few lawyers over the years that have been in the running, but you're quoting a legendary literary figure who placed not just his reputation on the line, but his very life on the line to defend a very unpopular defendant within the scope of the book To Kill a Mockingbird.
Right. And it's a great book. Actually, you know, it's funny. I saw the Ruth Bader Ginsburg documentary that they made. I don't know if it's a documentary or quasi-documentary, but did you see that?
I did not.
And her daughter, was extolling Atticus Finch, and Ruth Bader Ginsburg was telling her Atticus Finch wasn't a very good lawyer. And I forget now specifically what things she brought up, but she was sort of attacking him, which bothered me. You know, being a fan of the book and of Harper Lee, it bothered me that the Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I don't know if it was real, but it was in the movie, she was attacking Atticus Finch.
In my humble opinion, most Hollywood portrayed and fictitiously portrayed lawyers are lawyers that would get themselves thrown out of court by a judge or get themselves disbarred because they're doing things that work for the story. There's certain dramatic flair there, but you could never do that in a courtroom.
Yeah, you know, I remember going to some of the movies and the TV shows when I was fresher out of law school, and I would sit there and say, oh, no, they can't do that. Oh, they can't do that. Now, more time's gone by, and I'm sort of either I've forgotten some of the things that you can't do, or probably I have, or I've mellowed, because I don't do that anymore. But I can remember sitting in the movie theater and bothering the people around me by saying, oh, that's bullshit. You can't say that.
I've never watched any of the primetime dramas about legal.
There are a lot of them, by the way.
There are
tons.
Yeah, I never watched L.A. Law, never watched the Special Victims Unit, never watched any of that kind of stuff because the inaccuracies just drove me insane.
I can see that, particularly considering how much you were in it. But now going back to this conversation we had about no Atticus Finch from Jacksonville, and I like history.
Yes.
My response to you was, yes, we do. Yes, we did have an Atticus Finch, and his name was Brian Simpson.
Yes, I recall that conversation quite well.
And you had come back, and I don't know that we ever got an answer, but you had sort of looked up Brian Simpson and decided maybe there was some merit to my acclaiming him as our legal hero, or
yes,
justice hero, judicial hero.
He stood a few lawyers tall when he was on the bench that were pressing the issues on civil rights, where Florida being one of the 11 states of the Confederacy, it's not all Miami and Disney World. Back when the civil rights fight was going on, it was the South. And there were quite a few people that were doing everything in their power to deny black citizens of the United States of America their due process rights under the civil rights legislation and the follow-up Supreme Court cases. And he, as a judge, did do within the idea of what Atticus Finch was doing, which was defending an innocent black man against an unjust cause. Brian Simpson, as a judge, did in very many ways take up that gauntlet and act in that role, where he would ensure that anyone coming before him who was an African-American litigant did in fact get the benefit of the law.
Yeah, I think that was really important to him, because I don't think that he was any kind of a social changer or a do-gooder. I mean, I think what he saw was he saw a law. That law had to be enforced, and there were multiple laws, as you sort of pointed out, and he does that. And all sorts of really famous African American leaders come before him. Obviously, Martin Luther King and Andrew Young, but others as well. And he apparently treated them, insisted that the court, at a time when the court may not have treated them that well, that they be treated equally before the bench.
He did, and when he became a federal judge is when he really had the opportunity to ensure that they were treated fairly and they were treated justly, because federal judges are appointed for life. You have to be really incompetent or really corrupt, and I mean really incompetent or really corrupt, to get removed from the federal bench. And it allows judges who have a passion for the law, and that's who Brian Simpson was. He was an attorney when he was a litigator. He had a passion for the law when he was a state court judge. He had a passion for the law, and when he became a federal judge, he had a passion for the law, and he really took the opportunity to use the power of the federal bench to see that civil rights were equally distributed to all people that became before the bar of justice.
We're going to take a break. When we come back, let's talk a little bit more about Simpson and the desegregation of the schools, the parks, the golf courses, and some of the
entertainment venues.
Entertainment venues, but some of the pushback.
Hi, this is Steven Stanfield. I'm a trial attorney in the Jacksonville, Florida area, and I'm here on 103.9 with Scott Grant.
Hi, this is Scott Grant. You're listening to the Scott Grant Show. I'm here with Jennifer Price and Steven Stanfield. And before the break, we were talking about one of my heroes, federal Judge Brian Simpson. And I think we were talking about, desegregating a variety of institutions here in the Northeast Florida area.
That is true.
And I know that golf courses were one. And I know some parks. There were some parks that were segregated, and of course the schools. And got to think that the schools were probably the one that upset the most people.
The thing about it that makes the whole civil rights era in the 1960s in the United States, and especially in the South, I mean, there were pockets in the Northeast, there were pockets out west.
Oh, listen, there was plenty of segregation in the Northeast and in the West. We often try and act like it didn't happen, but it did. And,
it did.
And, there's that movie they made, I think they called it 42, about Jackie Robinson, and it's just another Jackie Robinson movie, and as far as I'm concerned, it's really another Branch Rickey movie. It's more about Branch Rickey and Branch Rickey making this happen than it is about Jackie Robinson. But there's that scene where they're flying from California to Florida, and they stop in Alabama or Louisiana, and she is shocked. Mrs. Jackie Robinson, his wife, is shocked to see that there are colored bathrooms. Being from Pasadena, California, she was totally unaware that this stuff went on, and that scene always kind of grates on me because Pasadena was pretty segregated.
Yes, it was. One of the things that a lot of people are not aware of about the civil rights legislation that was passed in the 1960s, and then, of course, the follow-up Supreme Court cases, is they were only applicable to the 11 states of the Confederacy. They only applied to the 11 states of the Confederacy. And so the whole reason why in northeastern United States, New York, Boston, the Midwest, places like Minneapolis and Chicago, the whole reason why you can have hugely segregated neighborhoods is because the civil rights legislation and Supreme Court cases did not apply there. And they could do those things.
That's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I know we talked about that before, you and I know I've had that conversation, but I hadn't thought about it in a while. One of the things I always say is, I mean, it was bad in Boston. It was bad in Newark, New Jersey. There was a substantial amount of segregation out in California. Jackie Robinson's older brother wins a silver medal in the 1936 Olympics, running the 200-meter dash. He finishes second to Jesse Owens in Berlin. When he goes back to Pasadena, there aren't any jobs for him. He eventually gets a job with the park department, but he gets fired because they decide to close the pool rather than integrate the pool.
Yes.
Those stories are true. There's lots of those stories, right?
Yes, there are lots of those stories. The South, for various reasons that we don't have enough time to get into today, has the black eye that the rest of the country has been spared.
Yeah, and then you talk about de facto segregation, and you're still seeing that all over the place, and you certainly was in the North. The South does get a black eye, and we talked a little bit about that. Maybe we will some more, but I kind of want to finish up Simpson. Simpson does desegregates all these institutions down here, and at least starts the process, and he defends the marches in St. Augustine, and he takes a lot of flack.
He does, and once again, as I was saying earlier, once he got to become a federal judge, he had a lot more protection to do it. He had the federal marshals behind him. He had the full weight of the United States government back in the 1960s. I don't care who you were. I don't care if you were the Mafia. I don't care if you were the KKK. You didn't mess with a federal judge. You just did not do it. It was something that it didn't cross their minds. And so he was really able to do the right things that needed to be done from that position.
But, despite the fact that he was somewhat protected, he got threatened a lot.
Sure. He got death threats all the time.
He would tell his family, they would get worried about all the letters that would arrive saying, I'm going to kill you. And he tells his family, he says, I don't think anybody who's really going to kill me is going to send me a letter first.
That sounds like the stories I've heard of Brian Simpson. I've never met the man. I know an attorney in Jacksonville who has in fact met him, was friends with his son.
Well, I've interviewed the son a couple times, and I'm working on a piece. I just never finished it for it's for Jacksonville Magazine. They don't know it yet, but it's going to go in Jacksonville Magazine, and it's good. But that's one of the stories Brian Jr. told me, is that his dad said, I don't think anybody's going to kill me. He's going to send me a letter first, and it always that thought always touches me.
Is it true that he got a cross burned in his front yard?
They attempted to burn a cross. That's the story. And you and I, you're right. You and I have heard that a few times, and Steven and I have talked about that as well. Brian Simpson Jr. says that he was returning from a party, or was returning from someplace, and he saw a bunch of cars parked in front of the house, and he thought to himself that his brother, or his older brother, was going to be in big trouble because he had had a party. Had his friends over, and mom and dad were, dad being a federal judge, were not going to be happy about that. And then he says when he pulls into the driveway, they all ran away and left the cross behind, that it was never lit. That's the story he tells. Based on his age and the age of the older brother, that would have probably been in the 50s. So it could be that there was a second incident, because Stephen had suggested that Simpson comes out either in his pajamas, in a bathrobe, and tells him, go away. I'm a federal judge, and you're going to get in a lot of trouble. And so it could be that there were two incidents. We don't know.
I was born in 1970, so of course, obviously, I wasn't alive in the 1960s. But as I alluded to earlier, I have a father who's retired, who was an attorney, and Florida was a lot smaller place back then, and those kind of stories spread a lot more rapidly. But they also take on a certain legendary quality when anybody stood up to the full weight of public sentiment in a time when it wasn't just unpopular, it was considered, in a very strange, twisted way, it was considered impolite within the culture to go against the weight of your community.
Yeah, and you talk about that
Blasphemy.
Laws versus rules. And on that note, we'll take a break. Let Mike play some music.
I'm Michelle Joy Nixon here on 103.9 on the Scott Grant Show. Never forget, joy is always in you. Here to talk about Heart and Soul Ministry and so much more.
Hi, Scott Grant here. You're listening to the Scott Grant Show, and I'm in the studios in beautiful downtown Ponte Vedra Beach with Jennifer Price and Steven Stanfield.
Thank you for having me, sir.
I love having you. So you think, we were talking the other day, and you think that Governor DeSantis closing the bars and restaurants was unconstitutional. Is that correct?
I do. I believe that.
And why?
Well, he cited to a provision in the Florida State Constitution as the basis for his authority. And the clause that he cited to doesn't actually give him the authority to declare an emergency. The power that he has to declare an emergency comes from legislation passed by the Florida State Legislature, Chapter 252. And I was just recently looking at this, so that's how this is fresh in my mind. But the actual statute, the section, is 252.36, and the title of that section is Emergency Powers of the Governor. And it has a laundry list of powers as to the things that he can do once an emergency is declared.
And who declares the emergency then? The legislature?
The executive does. The governor.
Okay, so
does.
he can declare an emergency. Okay,
he can under the legislation, and you have to, for the sake of our discussion, you're assuming that legislation is in fact constitutional. But since he's deriving the power from statutes passed by the legislature, it's not strictly a part of the state constitution. So it's a weaker argument on his part to say I can declare an emergency.
And you think the Florida Constitution could be read to make that statute unconstitutional?
I think so, under certain circumstances.
Without losing Jennifer.
Or
me.
I'm just thinking about, I went to Waffle House this morning, and half the place was shut down, and they had put plastic bags over the seats to prevent, I guess, the 50% sit-down rate.
Yes, I've seen that in.
I haven't seen that yet. That was interesting.
I saw a Walgreens where they put down pieces of duct tape every 6 feet, where customers were supposed to stay beyond that to keep six feet between each other.
That's not a bad idea either.
Everybody back up.
Everybody keep that 6 feet distance.
Yeah.
So, so a hurricane's coming. We'll call it Hurricane Steven.
Okay.
Is bearing down on the first coast or Florida. The Governor DeSantis can declare an emergency in that circumstance. Is that right?
Well, once again, all the power that Governor DeSantis has to declare an emergency does not come from the Florida Constitution. It comes from Chapter 252 of Florida statutes.
Okay, and you would like a bar owner, a restaurant owner, to be a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the state of Florida. Is that right?
Would I like that? Yeah. I can't. I'm ethically prohibited from soliciting.
Right. I understand.
But would I like that? Yes, I would, because frankly, I think lawyers have an absolute obligation right now, pursuant to their oaths to challenge what is a potential overreach by the government. To try to break this down into layman's terms, we have the right to be free from unreasonable searches and seizures. And a seizure is it can be one of two things. That can be the government, and it's not just the police. It's a government actor is any employee acting on behalf of the government, who either takes your property or takes you, and so a seizure is an arrest. You can have a seizure without an actual physical arrest where they put handcuffs on you and they put you in the back of a police car, but when they command you to do certain things or not do certain things, that can be under the proper circumstances, that can be a seizure. And so when you're being told by the governor of the state of Florida, you cannot go to this restaurant and you cannot go to this bar and you cannot go to this lounge, you are having your liberty restricted by the government. Well, you have due process rights that the government should have to afford you without just a de facto fiat order by the governor.
And now, would the same apply to, let's say, Governor DeSantis closes the beaches, and I want to go to the beach. In fact, I want to go surfing. There's a hurricane coming. So Hurricane Steven's coming. The waves are really big. So is the same theory there?
Yes.
So
we should be allowed to be stupid.
Yes, actually, we should.
Well, we should be allowed to be stupid.
That's what my 14-year-old says.
Oh, does?
Let me fail. Let me do what I want.
Does she say, let me be stupid?
Yes, let me be stupid. Let me get hurt.
The difference there.
Like, no.
The difference there, a difference. Is that she's a child. She's a minor. You have an obligation as a parent to.
And so does the state. State has a greater obligation to protect children than adults.
That's correct.
So if in the surfing analogy, then the state would have more of a reason to keep a 14-year-old from surfing than a 30-year-old.
Well, I try to tell my kids that's why we have rules, is because there's a lot of people who aren't smart enough to maintain rules on their own.
And do you think you could win against the state on this keeping the bars open? Because I think there's probably a lot of people listening to this radio show, who would like to see the bar still open.
I think it would be a tough uphill battle, but I also think that the fight in and of itself is important to have, because without any pushback whatsoever, the government is merely going to be encouraged to go further. This is not going to be the last pandemic we're going to face. We see one every 2 years or so. And these are unprecedented steps that we've taken.
Well, let's just say that we had a plaintiff or a potential plaintiff in this lawsuit. So we'd want them to be a bar owner, presumably, and not a bar patron.
That's correct.
Fair? And what would we want them to do? To open the bar?
And
get arrested? And get arrested, right?
Not necessarily get arrested, just get a fine. I mean, what I think would happen is, because I do a lot of administrative law litigation, is they would be in jeopardy of losing their liquor license, which is they're very expensive to get in the first place, and they're expensive to maintain. Ultimately, could I see law enforcement arresting the bar owner? Yeah. There's a newspaper article just today about a bar owner in Cincinnati, Ohio, who was given multiple warnings to close his bar after the governor of the state of Ohio closed all the bars. And after multiple warnings, he kept the bar open. Police showed up, took him into custody, and then they boarded up the bar.
And was he looking for a lawsuit, do you think, or was he just being...
I think he was probably just being difficult.
Yeah, probably. All right, let's take a break. Let's let Mike... you know Mike Kaufman?
No, sir, I do not.
He's a nice guy. He's going to play us some music, and we'll be back.
Hi, I'm Mary Whitman Ortiz. I'm a relationship coach, and I talk about sex, which might be more interesting than hearing Scott Grant.
Hi, Scott Grant here, and I'm in our studio with Jennifer Price and Steven Stanfield. And during the break, you were telling me that the courts are closed. I didn't realize that.
Yes, the Chief Justice of the Florida Supreme Court, Richard Kennedy, issued an administrative order about a week ago closing certain aspects of the courts, like jury trials, jury selection, grand juries, and then gave the authority to the chief judges of the various circuits to take it further. And a lot of the chief judges of the circuits have done that.
Well, so how do I get my domestic issues heard in court if there's nothing you can do?
Well, that's a very interesting question, Jennifer, because since we're being encouraged to take shelter in our homes and to self-quarantine, to isolate, the social distancing, people are going to be home.
Oh, yeah. I just want to jump in and say that we're all sitting at least 6 feet apart from each other here in our studio.
Back up.
Yeah.
It's supposed to be 10.
No, 6 feet, I thought.
All right.
Yeah, so
we are practicing social distancing, and we coated everything in Lysol and Clorox.
I wish I could do that with my kids.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, so
Sorry, Steven. Go ahead.
No, please. I appreciate the interruption. So here we are in our homes with our families who we don't see quite as often as we are now seeing, and we're basically been told this could go on indefinitely, meaning it could go on for 2 weeks, it could go on for 4 weeks, it could go on for 3 months. We don't know, and the not knowing adds a whole different level of stress than knowing a certain date. And the other thing that, of course, has happened, as we just talked about, is the bars have been closed, but the liquor stores have not. Ooh. And the propensity for real bad situations to develop in homes and families is now apparent. The courts have taken that into consideration. One of the actions that is at the very top of the list of the various chief judges of the circuits that I've read, and I've read 3 different orders from 3 different circuits because those are the places that I go to the most. Domestic violence injunctions and domestic violence cases are near the top of the list of priorities. And so people should be aware that just because the courts are closed, just because we're being encouraged to stay at home, and you can go into a liquor store and buy several handles of bourbon or scotch, doesn't mean you have carte blanche to be a barbarian and treat your family, treat your loved ones, lose control of yourself, be difficult. The same laws that applied before, they still apply. The courts are aware of it. They've taken that into consideration. I personally have to appear in court this coming Wednesday in front of Judge John Alexander in St. Johns County. I've received no notice that those hearings are being continued. I fully expect to show up that morning and to have the case adjudicated.
Wow. So some courts are going on then?
Some aspects of the courts are yes, they're going on. The things that the various circuits, and there are 67 counties in the state of Florida broken up into 20 judicial circuits.
Okay.
Duval County is part of the 4th Circuit. There are 2 other counties. St. Johns County, where Ponte Vedra is located, is part of the 7th Circuit. Both chief judges of those circuits have issued administrative orders, and in both circuits, near the top of the list of priorities of things that the courts will deal with and address are domestic violence injunctions.
It makes sense. I mean, I can see what you're saying. By the way, they closed the liquor stores in Pennsylvania.
That's interesting. All those coal miners, huh?
Well, the liquor stores in Pennsylvania are state-owned. I don't know that there are any other states like that anymore, but it used to be fairly common, particularly in the Northeast. And so, yeah, all liquor stores in Pennsylvania are closed.
When I was going to law school in Virginia, the liquor stores were owned by the state of Virginia. I don't know if they still are.
Yeah, I don't know if they still are either, although I do know that both Pennsylvania and Virginia were once, may still both refer to themselves sometimes as commonwealths. So
yes, that's possible.
I never totally understood what the difference was, but they may have something in common. Maybe that just how you sell your liquor, right?
So they're closing them just for the mere fact of subduing the population?
No, they're closing them because of the virus, so the virus doesn't spread in state-owned liquor stores. Now, whether that's reasonable or not is a different question, but that's the argument.
Yeah, the reason that Governor DeSantis in his press conference gave for closing the bars and the lounges was people that have been told you can't go to work, can't go to school, they're bored, they want something to do, they're going to congregate in large numbers with their friends, be social in bars and lounges. If you close them, then that can't happen. That's the theory behind the closure.
Sure.
But those people then now are going to liquor stores and buying liquor and taking the liquor home.
And that seems like a very combustible situation in a lot of cases. You know, but a family locked up at home without liquor can be bad. With extra liquor, maybe
worse.
Yeah. So let's talk about, we're talking about domestic violence now, right? I mean, that's really what we're talking about. So man gets violent with his spouse or his kids. The cops show up. They arresting him?
In all likelihood, yes.
Okay.
The domestic violence statute in the state of Florida has a clause in it that says that law enforcement cannot be held liable under the civil rights statutes for making arrests for anybody in the situation. That used to be an issue a couple decades ago.
Because I read something that I can't recall if it was St. John's or Duval, but they were talking about the sheriffs were being urged not to arrest people, but to give them court appearances.
Notices to appear.
Yeah, notice to appear. Right.
Right. That in some circumstances that's done, but when there's particularly little kids, and when they're at risk, yeah. We're not doing that. Right. When there's children that are at risk, when both spouses, both partners are under the influence of a controlled substance or alcohol, you're much more likely to see a physical arrest, because the physical arrest itself de-escalates the situation.
Interesting. All right, let's take another break, and we will come back.
Hi, I'm Mike Kaufman, and you're listening to Scott Grant, my hero, on the Scott Grant Radio Show on 103.9 FM, WSOS, St. Augustine Radio.com.
Hey, Scott Grant here, practicing social distancing on the radio. I'm much more than 6 feet away from you if you're listening to my voice right now. And I'm here with Jennifer Price.
I'm safe.
And Steven Stanfield. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
It's great having you. We talk a lot. We were talking about social distancing in the break, and you said you had a good story about how to keep people away from you at a bar. I'm not sure that it helps right now because the bars are closed, but let's hear the story.
Well, in general, different situations apply. But this happened back when I was still doing criminal defense full time. I do different kind of stuff. But I had spent about 7 hours in court one day. It was a Friday. I was tired. I want to say it was the summer because I was hot, had pulled down the tie of my suit, but I was wearing a black suit with a black tie and a white shirt because I wanted to give a very serious appearance in the courtroom. And I went to my favorite watering hole on the way home. Sat down at the bar and ordered my usual, which is an old-fashioned.
I like old-fashions.
So do I. They tend to have 2 to 3 ounces of bourbon in them.
And my uncle, I got an uncle, lives down South Florida. He makes a really good old-fashioned.
The Blind Rabbit makes a really good one.
Really?
That's my favorite.
Okay.
I'll have to remember that.
I don't even know where the Blind Rabbit is, but I have heard the name. Go ahead.
So and I will admit, in about 45 minutes to an hour, I'm pretty sure I was on my third one. And some very happy, upbeat guy comes and sits at the bar next to me. And this is a nice bar. This was not a dive. This was in an upscale neighborhood called Hale Plantation, and it's a nice place.
And this is near Gainesville.
This is in Gainesville, Florida, right. And he's trying to engage me in conversation. He's being polite, but I don't want anything to do with the guy because I'm tired, I'm brain dead, I'm spent, I just want to relax.
You need distance.
And I think this is the way most of the trial lawyers are after trial. I mean, the ones that I've known. They'll sometimes talk to me or somebody, but they don't really want to talk to anybody. Even me some of the time, right?
This is true. When I'm done, I'm in my own world. I just want to be there and be left alone. And that's where I was that day. And he didn't know that. And I didn't want to be rude and I didn't want to be mean, but I also didn't want the guy to talk to me. I wanted him to leave me alone. And finally, after, and I'll be frank, I was curt, I was direct, and he wasn't getting the point. And he finally asked me, "So, what do you do for a living?" And I slowly turned and looked at him with a very serious expression on my face, no smile. I pitched my voice to carry across the room, and I said, "I defend rapists, murderers, and child pornographers." He looked at me for a brief second or two. He got his drink, quietly got up from the bar, moved to the other side of the room, And no one else sat there for the rest of the time I was there, and that's exactly what I wanted.
I bet nobody came up. Well, nobody that heard that was going to come sit next to you, except it was
Maybe a potential client.
Yeah, or maybe a potential client. Right. Have you ever defended a child pornographer?
I've defended people accused of child pornography.
Oh, good one.
Good one.
Which in one case turned out to be a photographer, independent photographer who was hired by a family to take pictures of their children. And if you've ever been to Gainesville, there are some people that have some very interesting values. And the prosecutors, after the gentleman was arrested, and I had a chance to talk to the prosecutors, decided that this was legitimate art photography. That case went away. Then another one, there's no other way to describe what was on the man's video camera but child pornography.
Okay.
I'll be frank, I got that case dismissed because the state, and by the state I mean it was the Florida Highway Patrol. They stopped a trucker for speeding. They found the video camera, and they searched through it without a warrant, without any probable cause, and the search got suppressed. And just one more quick story to illustrate a point. To illustrate a point.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, an attorney I know in Daytona Beach that I met when I was a prosecutor named Eric Latensky, who is an excellent lawyer and a bulldog, told me a true story about being hired by a guy for capital sexual battery of a child. He said he didn't want to have anything to do with it because he had 2 daughters. He quoted the guy what he thought to himself, what's a reasonable fee? Then he doubled it and said, I need it all in cash up front. Guy walked out of his office, said he never thought he was going to see the guy again. Guy came back with the money in a briefcase. Eric took the case, defended it. The state, perfect case, no mistakes, no errors. Guy got convicted, and Eric then, his comment on that and telling me the story was, I made a lot of money off the case, and this scumbag got exactly what he deserved.
Well, that's an interesting way to put it. That is an interesting way to put it. I was going back to you got this guy off, this trucker who had, video or whatever. And a lot of people would see that as wrong. The wrong result, because we're pretty uniform in our hatred, justifiable hatred of anybody involved in anything that's harmful to children. But every, part of the story is every defendant deserves competent representation.
They deserve competent representation. They also deserve, part of it, yes, that's the main focus, is everybody deserves competent representation. But the other thing that's going on is the old saying of the road to ruin is paved with good intention.
Yeah.
And there are plenty of times that police officers and prosecutors, they have the best of intentions. They decide by any means necessary, and that can't be permitted to happen. Sometimes lawyers, defense attorneys will fight fights even though they don't like the client. They may even despise the client. But it's not always about the client. Sometimes it's just about the rights that the client has that have to be protected.
And it's not just the right
everyone else.
It's not just a child pornographer's right. It's all of our rights. We all have this right to not be subjected to, we talked about earlier, unreasonable searches and seizures.
That's right.
Is that the right phraseology?
Yes, sir, it is. And like I said earlier, I would like to fight the fight against the governor's order for the simple fact of the matter to tell the governor, tell the state of Florida, tell whoever else is watching from other states, hey, you don't get to just take all of our liberty away in the name of an emergency. It has to be narrowly tailored for a specific purpose. We have the Constitution of the United States protecting our rights, and it should matter. It should mean something.
Well, yeah, and everybody has rights that they care about more or less than others. But those rights are for all of us. I mean, they protect us all, whether we realize it or not. And I think it's admirable that anybody would want to take that on. And what you're talking about is perhaps, maybe it'll never happen, but suing the state of Florida and Governor DeSantis specifically for overreaching in closing down the bars and restaurants.
Yes.
All right. We're out of time. I just want to make sure everybody knew that. We'll be back next week. And I'm here signing off with Jennifer Price.
Keeping my distance.
And Steven Stanfield.
Me too. Thank you very much.
Thank you.